Hi guys, it is Chase Porter, and this is the New Age Comics Podcast. So some insight into the moments before you just began hearing my voice. What was going on in my head is I have come to the conclusion I dislike this intro. I do not know what to do for an intro. I'm pulling the curtain completely down here. I am kind of just like stuck. I'm like, what do I say in this intro? I know it's the New Age Comics Podcast. You guys know it's the New Age Comics Podcast. At this point, I suppose most of you know what it is you're going to get here. And it feels so just strange to kind of just will this conversation into existence. But the interesting thing is that just now I have established that I dislike the intro in the intro, thus blowing through the intro. So here we are. Welcome, guys. We are here to, as we always do, talk about some comic books. I am coming to you live from my campus recording booth here, and it is 12:03 in the morning. Another late one. I kind of knew this was going to be a late evening, guys. And that's the thing. I get in the studio here, and I pretty much stare at the mic for half an hour before I'm like, fuck it, let's just go. Let's just start talking. And now I'm all sweaty and clammy. It's just terrible. But I digress. My day has been all right. I've been sleeping a lot. I didn't sleep a lot last night, and I took a big nap today, and that was awesome. And then I read the rest of last week's comics for the 23rd of December and was like, hey, might as well go do the podcast. Why not? But we had quite the blessed week this last week. There was actually a ton of great comics. I tweeted about this. This was probably one of the most difficult weeks to narrow down what comics would make my top 5 here. So if you're new here, the show is kind of broken down into 3 parts. We have a news segment, something topical about the comic book news, and then rapid fire, what comics didn't make my top 5, and then my top 5, and then what's dropping next week. So kind of 4 segments. And this was one of the hardest weeks to narrow down what comics would actually make that top 5. And once I narrowed it down to those 5, it was so difficult to order them from 1 to 5. So I will probably be reordering them in my head like a dozen times before I end up just saying fuck it and doing what I have written down here. But let's just keep trucking towards that then. A couple quick things. If you like what I'm doing here, you can follow me on Twitter at New Age Comics Pod or wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube. And comment and let me know what comics you liked from this last week or something along those lines. And hey, a cool extra thing. This is sort of a extracurricular activity. If you really like what I'm doing, if you are a big fan, there is a way you can help me out that's actually really awesome. There is this website called Podchaser, and you can go leave me a rating there. Basically, what Podchaser is it curates podcasts for other people. And so if I have good ratings on there, this podcast will be curated to other people. So if you like what I'm doing here and you really want to help me out, go drop me a rating over on Podchaser. You can go to www.podchaser.com/newAgeComics. And yeah, last little thing, I do spoil all the comics that drop that I talk about. So if you do not want to have them spoiled for you, go read them and come back. We'll talk about it. And that is about all I have. Let us talk about our news segment today.
Now look, I want the real story.
So this is actually going to be more or less news and actually just a discussion that's been occurring recently on the online Twitter comic circles that I particularly find myself kind of entrenched inside of. But essentially, the story is kind of dubbed, I have dubbed it in my notes, the 20 pages of a superhero comic. And if you're plugged into these circles, you will probably already know what that is. But I will tell you, it all comes down to this one single tweet sent by a comic creator named Gleb Melnikov. And what he did, I'll read the tweet. It says, "Please don't do this. You have 20 pages of superhero comic. You don't want to waste 3 of them on the exact same face over and over again." The comic being referred to there is Venom issue number 25, written by Donny Cates. And it's one of these scenes in the book that if you read it, you may remember. It's Eddie telling this kind of bigger story about just how his life has been going over the past couple years. The writer continues saying, I mean, I don't know, maybe the deadline was tight and they had to cut some corners, but if they did it just because they wanted to, awful. 1 page? Sure. 3 pages? No. Again, I don't think that pages with only talking heads are always bad. But yeah, I think that 3 pages, it's actually 4, there's another one later in the issue, is too much for a standard single issue. And that is a good way to describe kind of what that scene is. It's sort of just a talking head kind of moment. You can maybe compare it to Heroes in Crisis, some of those confession scenes where it's just kind of a 9-panel grid of just talking, essentially. And this spurred a pretty deep and pretty, passionate conversation on comic Twitter over here, with a lot of other creators, some high-profile creators responding to this. And I will be reading kind of what they said. We have a good handful of responses here, and there's kind of some from both sides. So just to break down the both sides here, what Gleb is saying here is that 3 pages is actually a kind of significant percentage of a high-profile superhero book. And so 3 pages of just dialogue that essentially could be wrapped up in 1 page if you cram it, considering that it's only them talking. So if you're on YouTube and watching me there, I will have the actual comic panels displayed there. But it's just him talking. So it's just his face turned in different ways in different directions. A lot of comics have done something like this. And what Gleb is saying is that it's too much. Like, you can tone it down and maybe give us some action pages. And that is kind of the crux of his argument. And the other side is that, hey, those are fun. Those are fine. Those deep conversational pages, they're required in a comic just to set up some dialogue and be kind of emotive. But other creators did chime in. We have Mitch Gerards saying something I probably personally identify with the most. He says, I gotta tell you, this mentality that spectacle comes before storytelling is some real 90s bullshit. Comics have evolved, storytelling has evolved, readers have evolved. I will continue because then we get some creator actually agreeing with him, and it's kind of longer, but I will read it out. Alex DeCampi said, I think the sentiment that, quote, storytelling has become more sophisticated and, quote, this is a bad, lazy sequence can happily coexist. Why a whole splash page for a head? Why no reaction shots or cutaways? This is the sort of stuff that all 3 of us have pulled off in the past with people we collaborate closely with. In Mitch and my cases, they were likely 9-panel grids, and not everybody can do it. This sequence doesn't land. It happens. Better luck next time. And Gleb actually replied to that response and said no lies here. But honestly, most creators were against Gleb here in this case. We actually have Donnie Cates responding specifically to him saying, fun to wake up to comics Twitter dismantling 3 pages of a book I wrote over 6 months ago. Guys, I have plenty of new stuff that sucks too. At least be current. I think it's nice that Donnie Cates is at least taking, a funny approach to it. He's not getting too worked up in it because honestly, it might not be worth his time to get all involved in something like this. And maybe one of the more interesting replies to this, because this is honestly one of the writers that I think commits this sin, quote unquote, if you will, the most, and that is Tom King. And he actually took kind of a Donnie Cates approach as well, saying 3 pages of a static headshot in a comic book where the only visual limit is human imagination. Absurd. You should do at least 4, which I mean is pretty funny. And he included a picture of his work with 2 9-panel grids with this face headshot stuff going on. So he is definitely admitting that he is kind of one of the biggest sinners of this. And so what are my thoughts on this? Like I said, this is kind of a unique segment. It's not exactly comic news, but definitely spurred a pretty heated discussion. I honestly fall onto the side of I think it is perfectly okay, and honestly, I kind of dig scenes like that. I understand where Gleb is coming from a little bit, that, the action panels are the most exciting, and I will completely grant him that because it's definitely true. But I am personally very much into taking in the story the way that the writer wants us to, and I kind of like to give that full creative I don't know, freedom to the writer, to the point where I like to give, I guess, writers chances on certain things, you know. Like I will give a comic a shot 2 or 3 issues in, just to kind of see where they go with it. And that's kind of, I guess, the same approach I would feel in issue with one of these static headshot scenes. I would patiently read what the character is actually talking about, and honestly just accept it as something that the writer feels that we ought to sit through and experience, because there can be a lot of benefits to it. You know, if you get, like in this Tom King example, 2 pages of static headshots, or in the Donny Cates example, 3 or 4 pages, that is setting up suspense, you know, to some degree, because now we have experienced kind of a more mellow scene. So I assume, and this is generally the case, that there is a crazy climactic scene later in most of these books, to kind of compensate, I guess you could say, for some of the lacking in action. But like I said earlier, I tend to agree with Mitch Draws on this one, because that way of thinking is kind of some like 90s, you know, bullshit. Just that comics are supposed to be just bombastic and crazy. Don't make them too deep and don't make them complex. Because what he said is absolutely true, in my opinion. Comics have evolved. And the readers ourselves have evolved. You know, we're a different audience these days than it was in the 90s. So I think that these kind of drawn out scenes are generally really cool. I can recall tons of them that, you know, were great. I saw some people connecting this directly to Brian Michael Bendis. He kind of popularized, to some degree, this style of writing, you know, the Bendisification of comics. But I mean, people like to dog Bendis here and there, but you have to admit he has some classics under his belt that commit this very sin. Jessica Jones, the original Jessica Jones series, is absolutely one of them. That happens in the first couple issues, I believe. There's the very, I'm pretty sure, infamous scene of the interrogation of her, between her and the police officer. You know, that was completely talking head, but one of the greatest scenes in that whole book, just because the dialogue is so cutting like that. And so there absolutely are great examples of this trope in comics. Are there bad examples? Sure, why not? But that's with everything in comics. You get that with action scenes. There are plenty of times where I think a comic was way too nuts and too actiony. That's exactly how I felt about Empire. Actually, I wish there were more scenes to let certain bits of lore breathe in that event. So that's an example where I felt like it was too much action for an event book. You know, we needed some meat to the story more than just the crazy shit going on. So that's kind of my take on this. I would love to hear what you guys have to think about this topic. Do you enjoy some of these talking head style pages or not? If you can leave that in a comment, I would love to continue this conversation down below with some of you guys. Gosh, I just had to stop recording and go take a leak, because every time I get in here, I'm so nervous. I bring like a whole concoction of drinks to just drink and chug while I'm so nervous. And I chug an entire small Red Bull and then pretty much damn near an entire body armor. And so I just had to go pee. But excuse me. Okay, let's get into the rapid fire comics from this last week. Did not make the top 5, but good comics nonetheless. Let's begin with Action Comics 1028. So I just forced myself to sit down here in the studio because I was freaking out. I usually record standing, and so by making myself sit down, I'm hoping I can relax. But anyway, so Action Comics 1028. This was highly anticipated for me because I've been a fan of the Bendis Superman verse, and this is his grand conclusion of his entire run. His Superman run and his Action Comics run have been running synchronously, and Superman ended just last week, and now we are getting the end of Action Comics. This is also the end of the House of Kent arc with Part 7. I honestly have to say I don't think that this ending stuck the landing, unfortunately. I really did enjoy Action Comics. It was probably my favorite of the two. The beginning of it is phenomenal. It has some great art and some really exciting storytelling. And I am willing to stand on this hill that I really enjoyed the Leviathan stuff. I thought that all was really great. But The House of Kent here, it kind of, I don't know, I appreciate what he was going for. He was trying to tie together the whole Superman family into one grandiose story. And hey, I think he did that pretty decent. But this last issue here kind of ends up being a bit of shine for Connor Kent, who is the clone of Clark Kent and Lex Luthor. And we get to learn a little more about him. I'm not super attached to him as a character, so wasn't super important for me. And then we get to see John, his son, go back to the future, to the Legion of Superheroes, correct? And that's sort of it. It just kind of wraps up in a neat little bow. I don't know. I guess, like I said, I don't really feel like it stuck the landing too well, but it does leave off the run in a good place. I have to give Bendis that. A lot of people dislike a lot of the stuff that Bendis tried to do with Superman, but we leave off here with his identity being known to the world, yes, but also Jimmy Olsen owning the Daily Planet, and then John Kent, his son, is still in the future. I get that some people don't care for the John Kent stuff, and hey, I get it, but I think I am excited to look at how Philip Kennedy Johnson picks up this run where it is at, coming all down the line in March, and we'll see how it kind of goes. I'm pretty interested to watch and just kind of go along with the ride, I guess. So this is a bit of a long review, maybe a little ranty, but those are my thoughts on the end of the Bendis Action Comics run. I also grabbed Undiscovered Country, number 11, an Image comic. So this comic has been coming out for almost a year at this point, pretty much 1 year. And, it's getting good, but I will say it's getting a little convoluted. The crew is in this, like, super techie place, and they're in the, like, tech astral matrix realm. I don't know. It's getting a little convoluted, a little confusing. I'm still liking the run, but I guess I'm hoping things kind of snap up and become a little more, I don't know, straightforward here in the next couple issues, or at least something big happens where that becomes the new main attention thing. This run seems to be going in arcs, so I can kind of expect that. So I will just have to keep reading. I also picked up Batman White Knight Presents Harley Quinn issue number 3, the Black Label book. It is going pretty well. I think this is sort of an offshoot of the Sean Murphy verse, obviously Batman White Knight Presents. And it's basically a noir story with Harley Quinn, the OG Harley Quinn. That's some deep lore into this alt universe, with her doing a little noir story. And it's fun. I'm curious to see how much it actually contributes or progresses this universe. It is progressing things here and there very slightly, and making a lot of strange and interesting references to the Death of the Family arc. So I'm curious to see if Red Hood actually becomes relevant throughout some point in this 6-parter, I believe. So, it's getting pretty cool. I was pretty excited for this next book, King Size Conan issue number 1. Obviously, anthology type of books are all the rave these days. And so I was really excited for a big, thick anthology for some Conan. I love Conan. And I guess I did drop both of the Conan series that were coming out, but I love him in Savage Avengers. I pretty much give everything a shot. And so this was pretty exciting. And as anthology type books go, there's some stories, you can take them, you can leave them. But this book does some pretty interesting things. They actually, in the first story, re-illustrate Conan the Barbarian issue number 1, the Marvel Comics version, not the Dark Horse Comics. They re-illustrate it with Steve McNiven. And I thought this was actually really cool. The story, I was kind of wondering at certain points, like, this feels a little old-timey. What's going on here? And then at the end, it says this is continued and was originally printed in Conan the Barbarian. So I might continue reading this just to see kind of how the first series goes. The Kurt Busiek story was all right, just a classic little Conan tale. I will say this though, if there is any story that you should check out from this book, you buy it online and just check it out really quickly. Absolutely, please check out the Chris Claremont story. The Chris Claremont story made this comic almost an honorable mention for me this week. It has art by Robert de la Torre, and it is such a phenomenal little short story about war, about with this girl whose mother is killed in war, and Conan is consoling her slightly. And Oh my God. It is just such a really wrenching and emotional story. Chris Claremont, his pen is still very strong. And then the Kevin Eastman story in the back was actually pretty fun. And then we end off with the story with art by Jesus Saiz. And that story was pretty decent, I will say. You know, some stories you take them, you leave them, and that's kind of how this one went. I will say they really should have gotten Jason Aaron to do a mini here, but here's the thing, he will be writing the upcoming King Conan little mini, so I am excited for that, and I may or may not get back into the Conan the Barbarian ongoing series, you know, we will see, but that's how I felt about this king-size Conan book. The book that I am throwing my honorable mention to is XO Manowar issue number 3, written by Dennis Hopeless, the new Dennis Hopeless XO flagship title run, blah, 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 all that Valiant lingo. But I really did like this issue a lot. We actually get to see XO get a new suit in this, kind of more of a suit upgrade. And he's grappling with, you know, trying to be a publicized hero versus just sort of letting his own moral compass guide him. And he has this agent, and he's kind of being a shithead. And there is a pretty decent cliffhanger at the end here of this book. So, you know, the next book advertises new suit, new Manowar. I guess we will have to keep reading. But I am liking where this XO Manowar series is going. Definitely check it out if you are interested in that. Okay, so I do realize that I just devoted less time to my honorable mention than I did King Size Conan. But hey, it was an anthology type book, so cut me some slack. But now let's move into my top 5 this week. And goddamn, guys, let me just tell you how difficult it was to narrow down, and not only that, but order these 5 issues. Like, seriously, I feel like I could wake up tomorrow and literally flip-flop this whole list around. There were so many awesome fucking comics this last week. I even struggled with some of those comics, wanting to throw them into the top 5. But I digress. Let's talk about the number 5 issue here. This one has got to go to the Department of Truth, issue number 4. This is written by James Tynion IV, drawn by Martin Simmons, all the art by Martin Simmons. And man, I have been loving Department of Truth. I am so happy that I took just, I guess, the risk and decided, hey, fuck it, get into this series. I remember I wasn't going to until one day I saw that it was coming out just the next Wednesday. And I read the description of, I guess, the little tease for the comic, and I was like, okay, conspiracy theories, that's kind of up my alley. And I basically just took a risk on it, and I am so fucking happy I did. This series is seriously probably one of the most unique and interesting comics on the rack right now. It essentially is dissecting conspiratorial thinking, which is extremely prevalent nowadays. And I am a sucker for, I guess, you know, things that follow current events. I really am into, I guess, like, I follow some of the current events. I follow politics a little bit in my not comic book life, in my personal life, I guess you could say. And so this book gets pretty political at times, and I actually really do appreciate some of the angles and approaches that they take. And I think the reason I'm giving this one top 5 is for its political approach in this book. Each issue kind of tackles one conspiracy theory, and if you haven't been reading this amazing series, please do. But the main idea for the story is there is a secret government organization that is called the Department of Truth, and I believe the function of them is that they control and, I guess, maintain conspiratorial thinking in the U.S. As far, I'm pretty sure what I'm picking up from the series, it gets a little confusing at times. It's hard to know whose motivations are what, at least for me. I could probably do a little rereading, but I believe they are trying to keep conspiracies. They want certain things to remain ambiguous and let them remain harmless conspiracy theories. And they've tackled quite a few, and some of them actually very topically. I believe the last issue, which also made my top 5, talked a lot about the crisis actors conspiracy theory, though, you know, the Alex Jones conspiracy that the Sandy Hook victims were actually just crisis actors. And I think that issue handled that topic super tastefully and really emotionally, and it was kind of, you know, flooring. I do not know of another very political book that is on the stands right now. I know Image is publishing another book called Bomb Queen. I need to check that out. But now I'm getting off topic. This issue tackles, I guess you could call it, it's hard to say, but essentially QAnon. I mean, it's sort of QAnon, sort of not. It tackles the conspiracies that kind of surround the Democratic Party, I guess. And, it kicks off kind of with a very centric one, which actually is I think it's referred to as the birther conspiracy, which is that President Obama was not born in the U.S. It was that he was born in Kenya or something crazy like that. I don't know. But our main character in this book is standing next to Lee Harvey Oswald, of all people, which is such a cool fucking story element. But there's been this journalist who has kind of received, I believe it's faked documentation that would hypothetically prove literally a dozen conspiracy theories that range pretty wildly. Some of them, relate to like Jeffrey Epstein and the Clintons. Some of them are the birther conspiracy. Some of them go as far as like Obama was being trained as like a Muslim insurgent or something into the U.S. government. It gets super nuts. But this whole time it's being accompanied by like truly just fucking breathtaking art. Martin Simmons is so chilling. At times this comic treads like traditional like comic panel structure, and at times it also just completely fucks off with some of the traditional paneling, and I really like that. It's just such a visual joy to read, and the ending here to this comic is absolutely heart-wrenchingly, oh god, just so heavy, basically. And like I said, I give full spoilers here. Our main character is essentially faced with, he has to kill these two journalists that have been exposed all these secrets, because what him and Lee Harvey Oswald are thinking is that someone is trying to expose the Department of Truth as a entity, which would kind of fuck everything up as far as they are concerned. And our main character has to decide to kill these two journalists, and the ending here is so masterfully written. It's one of those things where we don't actually see the killings. We just see Lee Harvey Oswald standing in front of the television monitors, and they have some flashes of light. And it's a really amazing ending here. And, it establishes a lot of personal characteristics for this series. It's not just that each issue explores a conspiracy theory. Like, there's an actual story that we are all following, I guess, here. But it's still weaving in topical conspiracies each time. This is what I'm saying. Like, this comic series is amazing. There's nothing else like it on the stands. And this is what I'm saying. How was I going to give this a 5 over the 4 or over the 3? God, I mean, this whole list is going to just be thrown out the window as soon as I leave. But absolutely, Department of Truth number 4 rocked it. I am loving this series so much. You have to be reading it. Taking my number 4 spot is actually a comic that I'm a little scared for your guys' reaction to where I'm placing this comic. But I'm giving my number 4 to King in Black issue number 2. Okay, so yes, I'm not giving King in Black 2 my number 1 this week, but there's a lot of reasons. Okay, and I will get into that. But King in Black 1 absolutely rocked my world. Like that comic was so crazy, exactly what you want out of an event comic. It was just seriously another piece of Donny Cates's masterful execution of the Venom mythos. And not only that, but I loved the Venom tie-in that comes right after that, Venom number 31. I gave both of those comics my number 1 of the week. So in some sense, this is actually quite an upset, but this comic is still super phenomenal, and a lot of shit happens in it. But I will say, the first comic, it's definitely a shot of adrenaline, right? And I will say that this comic definitely keeps at the plateau of the first issue. This comic doesn't really elevate the stakes that much at all. I mean, it does in some senses, and I will get into those later. But I feel like it keeps the hype level like pretty steady. It doesn't outdo itself yet again. I think it keeps the craziness about steady into the second issue, and I think there was some functions to that, but we pick up right where Venom 31 left off, and that's not exactly a great place for Eddie. It's literally as he's falling, which is the name of this issue, Fall. And lo and behold, he slams right into the car. This is one of those circumstances of a cliffhanger that was very highly anticipated. So I opened up this issue feeling just so giddy. I was so excited to see where Eddie was going to continue from the ending of not only the first issue, but Venom 31. And he lands right smack dab into this car. And it's brutal. He slams right into it. And Spidey is the first responder here. And this is a pretty great scene, and actually features, it seems, a character sacrifice. And not only that, Noel has taken over some of our Avengers and some of our X-Men. And it's just totally nuts. Like, this issue kicks off full throttle here. But it kind of plateaus here after that intro scene with Eddie in a hospital bed. And this is where things get pretty dark and pretty grim for our heroes, to use a cliche statement. Jane Foster Valkyrie, she is overlooking Eddie, and she, if you guys have been keeping up with her, has the power now as Valkyrie to see basically how much time is left in someone's life. And looking over Eddie's body, she does not see much time left for him. He is on full life support in this hospital bed. And not looking good. Spidey has to go tell Dylan. It's all very sad. It's a very sad scene. But then after that, we kind of return back to our heroes, and they're planning pretty actively how to respond to this. And I love this. I love this scene, and it's exactly how I think the event keeps itself pretty steady paced, because it gives us a time to breathe and react to the events of the first issue. Because we all know Noel's here and everything is fucked, and we as the reader are wondering, man, how are they going to get out of this? And that's pretty much all they ask themselves in this issue, is how the fuck are we going to get out of this? We do get some tie-in connection here, which I love that, and I need that in every single event. If you have tie-ins to your event, especially like Marvel is doing it, where they have like 30 goddamn tie-ins for every event, you need to actively connect them to the event through the main series. That's my personal opinion, and some events do that really well, some not so well. But here we get some of that connection. Namor enters the fray here by talking to all of our heroes and doing the whole edgy, I have been the king of the abyss and the king of the darkness forever, so how can you fight without me? I guess this is going to tie in a little bit with his tie-in series that's coming out that I'm not caring for a whole lot. But this is all kind of set up in one splash page. We get to see Namor approaching some of these fish homies. We get to see my personal favorite, Blade. It looks like he just killed a ton of vampires, and he has showed up on Dracula's doorstep. I am super stoked to see where that goes. And then this I'm actually quite interested in. We get to see Fisk pop up pretty much to the bar. He pops up in the bar with no name and just says, who wants to make some money? This is clearly a setup for the upcoming Thunderbolts tie-in that I am super duper excited for. And then we also get to witness some of the scheming and the planning for how in the hell they're going to defeat Noel. And I guess here's what their plan is. They're going to capture a dragon symbiote, right? Or a Grendel, whatever they're called. And they're basically trying to hook up Eddie to control it. None of this goes super well, and we end off with a very, very climactic cliffhanger. Or should I say, I don't know, I guess a heavy cliffhanger. And that is Eddie flatlining in front of his son in the darkest thing. Like, seriously, Donny Cates, why did you have to do it to us like that? Like, that was brutal. You did not really have to make it that sad on us. Especially with that last panel of Dylan just saying dad. Like, geez. So that is where this issue ends off. Very, very heavy ending here. You flip the pages a little more, and you get some ads for Venom 32, and that looks like it's going to be Eddie kind of in, I don't know, limbo or something. So, there's going to be something going on here. Is Venom dead? Probably not, guys. I mean, come on. We all know it's comics. Like, characters do not die like that. But it's definitely very, very cliffhanger-esque. So this event has been amazing, like seriously amazing. It feels like absolute carnage, but if it was stepped up even another notch, because absolute carnage was definitely God being there, but now it's like God's God. God's God is here. So I've been loving King in Black. I absolutely cannot wait even to keep reading some of the tie-ins coming down the line. And even though I'm not giving issue 2 my number 1 spot this week, it's so deserving of all the credit still. For my third place comic this week, I think this definitely is a underdog comic that I wasn't expecting walking into this week that it would be my number 3, but I'm giving it to Dark Knight's Death Metal: The Secret Origin, number 1. This is a big team book in terms of the creative team, but it's not like the other Dark Knight's Death Metal tie-ins where it's an anthology type book. However, it still has multiple writers and multiple artists. So the people who worked on this book, it was written by Scott Snyder and Jeff Johns. Talk about a power team. But has pencils by a lot of people. I will rattle the names off here. Jerry Ordway does a good grip of the pages, as well as Francis Manipal, Ryan Benjamin and Richard Friend, as well as Paul Pelletier and Norm Rapmond. These are all the artists on the book. And this book, I will come out and say, I won't bury the lead. I think this book might be the best Dark Knight's Death Metal tie-in so far. And honestly, there's only one more. So this one has pretty good chances to be, in my opinion, the best death metal tie-in. What this book serves is, I think, generally a crash course and an amazing story about Superboy-Prime. He is the main character of this comic. And Superboy-Prime's origin story is pretty much recapped in this issue. And the gist of it is that he is somebody from the real world, quote unquote. I mean, technically it's like our world that we live in, which is, I guess, called Earth Prime. And it looks like the gist of it is he wished upon a star, quite literally, and became Superman or Superboy. And somehow was moved into the DC universe. And he has played sort of a pivotal role so far in Dark Knight's Death Metal. He, I guess, is kind of like a villain, bit of an asshole, but has found himself now in this issue on the side of our heroes. And this issue actually kicks off really, really emotionally, and I fucking love it. It has one of the most wholesome scenes I think I've ever read in a comic. Right in the beginning here, we get art switches as the timeline is kind of switching around, and I have to say, Francis Manipal nails every single page that he is drawing in this book, because we kick off with Superboy-Prime overhearing, obviously a super hearing, but he overhears that all the heroes kind of are looking down on him and see him as a villain, and all the villains see him as just kind of a weirdo or a freak, given that he's not from this universe. And so he feels hyper alienated. And this is seriously one of the most adorable scenes I think I've read all year. Superboy-Prime is just sitting there sulking, and Crypto just walks up to him, just doing the whole innocent, adorable dog thing. And he's being an asshole, he's like, what do you want? What are you looking at, you stupid dog? But Crypto is doing the whole like mouth open, tail wagging, and it ends with something so adorable. Superboy-Prime says, I remember the first story I read about you. Because he thinks about all of, I don't know, these characters as his old, just comic book idols. This scene, however, does not last long, as Connor Kent, runs up and he's like, hey, get away from the dog. I'll kick you into the dirt. They can't just let themselves breathe here. But this story gets so emotionally amazing here at the end. And that's really what this book nails here. It's super emotionally investing. And I think that's a lot coming from me, because I'm telling you guys that I did not know anything about Superboy-Prime until I walked into the death metal event. So it made me love this character in, just a couple appearances. And I think that is a pretty amazing feat on its own. But Superboy-Prime finds himself in a position where he's going toe-to-toe with the one who laughs. And it's actually a really amazing fight. The art switches up here again. I'm not exactly sure who this is, but the art during this fight scene is just crazy. Super action-packed. Crypto makes another appearance, which is super adorable. Another reason that I love this book and that you guys should love this book. But really, it's the ending of this book that steals the show for me. Superboy-Prime, he makes a humongous sacrifice. And this is what I was alluding to earlier when I was talking about King in Black, is that I love when they make the tie-ins relevant and important to the main story. I want to care about the tie-ins. I know there's a lot of skepticism around, are tie-ins worth it? Are they just, full of shit? I think a tie-in has a lot of potential to be a comic that can be really memorable and add to the event, but it has to be executed well. And I think this event executes it very well in this way, where the tie-ins are relevant to the story. I have particularly liked that about this event. I get that it's kind of annoying for some people, right? You don't want to buy every single tie-in, and I didn't buy every single tie-in. I skipped a few, but the ones that you do buy, you're not just getting, random bullshit. And I guess I've called them out if that is what you're getting, which I kind of feel like that's what the last event tie-in was like. But here's Superboy-Prime. He battles with the one who laughs and hurts him enough that a lot of these evil worlds that are filled with soldiers start to explode and disappear, I guess. I don't know if that means that he's killing all of these planets or if they're just disappearing. But it's so well written because our heroes are looking up and they see these worlds disappearing, and they look up and say, whoever did it, they just gave us a fighting chance. And then someone goes, whoever did it is dead. But who? Who did it? And then you turn the page and it says, we'll never know. And it's Crypto howling on top of Superboy's body. And I mean, wow, it is really just an emotionally wrenching ending. And it actually ends with something really cool where Superboy-Prime goes back to our world, to our universe. And it looks as though he maybe has powers in our universe. It's hard to say. But I think this book is an amazing solo tie-in book. It's one of these bigger books, so it'll take you a little longer to read. But I think it's absolutely worth it. If you've been reading death metal, this book was an absolute treat at the end of the event. And I hope the next tie-in, which has the most obnoxiously long name ever, but I hope that next tie-in is also equally as good. So yeah, death metal has been really fun, and I can't wait for the finale in, I think, 2 weeks here. For my number 2 spot this week, this was a sad one, and I'm giving this one to Detective Comics 1033. And I don't mean it sad like the last issue I talked about, but sad because we are at an ending point here. This week actually has a lot of books that are symbolic endings. My number 1 book is an ending. This book is the ending of a creative team here, Tomasi, Peter J. Tomasi. This is his last Detective Comics issue. He has been writing it since 996, so that's like 39 issues, 40 issues here. Pretty crazy. And then obviously Action Comics, Bendis is hopping off of that. So lots of endings here, but this ending is super amazing. Okay. So I've been loving the Peter J. Tomasi Detectives run. If you've been listening to this podcast for a minute, you guys know that. And one thing I love about this run is that it is just unadulterated bat fun is how I would put it. It's just fun Batman tales, and it's been tying in with the current events of Batman back during Joker War. We did get some Joker War tie-ins, but alas, here is the end of Peter J. Tomasi's run. Like I said, he's been writing it a while, and there's a lot of loose ends that kind of get tied up in this issue, but they get tied up really well, which is partially why I'm giving it the number 2 this week. So just to go over all that's going on right now, Damian has taken the Black Case book. Hush is back, and he has captured the entire Bat family, as well as there is a anti-vigilante mayoral candidate running around in Gotham, and the election is tonight, as well as there's tons of anti-vigilante, anti-Batman hysteria going around. And particularly here, we are confronting the Hush plotline. Hush is back, and he has the whole Bat family tied up in these gurneys, and I guess his plan was to sell all of their organs, right? So this is what I'm saying, just fun, crazy Batman stuff. But Batman and Damian, they are putting a kibosh on all of it. They go to fight Hush, and we get some pretty awesome emotional payout here. Something Tomasi is super embraceful of in this run. Even though I said it's just fun Batman tales, I'm telling you not to expect anything super canon, you're still going to get emotion with all of these characters. So, of course, here you get the whole, we were, two families, two friends, two brothers, two tragedies, the whole parallel with Hush and Batman, if you've read the original Hush tale, which is a great Batman story. And Brad Walker, he brings it here with the art. The art is super amazing. And we also get some really awesome emotional moments between Batman and Damian here. I know that Tomasi, I guess, has some history writing these two characters. He is not only, I think, the writer of the Super Sons run, which features Damian mainly, but also wrote the Batman and Robin run a while back, which literally was our man Batman and Damian Robin. And there's an amazing scene here that kind of ties into the whole Robin no more stuff, where Damian is not Robin in the comics at the moment. And then, like I said, we also update ourselves on mayoral candidate Christopher Nakano, who runs for mayor and wins in this issue. I guess we all kind of saw that coming, but that has some big repercussions for Batman. This guy is running on an anti-vigilante platform. So that is surely to affect Batman's, or I guess this run, particularly down the line. Because just like Action Comics, this run will be picking up down in March when the Future State is over. We will be picking up at 10:34 with a new creative team that I'm so excited for. The last few pages of this issue are pretty perfect, I would put it. Obviously, part of it is that Batman is moving out of Wayne Manor. He is kind of trying to symbolically move on from the death of Alfred. And so he sort of says his goodbyes to Wayne Manor here at the end, which is also a super emotional scene and very awesome. And I love this. I love when writers take the angle of writing their own goodbye into the dialogue here. And I feel like Tomasi does that, because one of the last things that Batman says, he says, all right, everyone say goodbye. He's rounding up all his like bat animals, right? He says, everyone say goodbye. Time to hit the road and make new memories. Which can kind of be said to be Tomasi saying a last farewell to the Detective Comics run that he's worked on for a while now, for I think, 2 years at this point. So this is pretty great. I think this was a perfect landing, I would say, to the end of this Detectives run. Unfortunately, kind of the opposite of how Action Comics went, where Action Comics had an amazing beginning and did not stick the landing. This Detectives Comics run sticks the landing so hard. One of the things I have been wondering, though, and I'll riff about this briefly before I move on to my number one issue. Tomasi, he set up a ton of cliffhangers at the end of some of his arcs that I guess, are we just never going to follow up on? If you've been reading the Detectives run for all of Tomasi's standing, there's so many, right? Even going back to his first arc, not his very first arc, his lead up to 1000, but his post 1000, the first arc was the Arkham Knight. And at the end, the Arkham Knight escapes her prison transport, and it just says to be continued, right? We never touch on it again. If you remember, there was the Nora Freeze arc with Mr. Freeze, where he unfreezes Nora, and then Mr. Freeze gets frozen, and now Nora is running amok, and she's the new Mr. Freeze, or Mrs. Freeze, rather. Never touched on it again. We also had that short 2-issue arc where the Spectre was resurrected. Never touched on it again. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many arcs that just never got touched on. Or the Two-Face cult, never touched on again. This is my point. There were so many runs I was like, waiting to come back and come full circle and to reconnect with, that it looks like we may just never connect with again. Unless Mariko Tamaki is going to be following up on some of those things. I'm not hopeful, you know. It's some of Tomasi's brain babies, right? Not hers. So I doubt she's going to touch on them. I guess we'll see. I hope she does. But I'll leave it at this. The Peter J. Tomasi Detective Comics run has been amazing. I would honestly say, and this is kind of a hot take, I will honestly say that I like it as much as the current Batman run, even when King was writing it, and even now that Tinian is writing it. Absolutely, it's just a great Batman story. If you just want fun Batman, this is a great read, a great light read, I would say. So those are my thoughts on the Detective Comics Peter J. Tomasi run, and I can't wait to pick it back up in March with Markio Tamaki and Dan Mora doing their thing. So very exciting. Okay, so maybe some of you have figured out what my number one comic is at this point, just by process of elimination. But it has to go to this issue, okay, guys? Doctor Doom, issue number 10. This is written by Christopher Cantwell, drawn by Salvador LaRocca, and colors by Guru FX, okay? I have been loving the Doctor Doom run. I vividly remember the first time that I had read the first issue, actually. I remember being at my girlfriend's place, and she was out cold, like totally asleep. I'm the night owl, right? Obviously, I'm always recording podcasts at fucking 3 a.m. But I'm the night owl, and I remember reading issue number 1 while she was sleeping. Just one of those weird memories. Point is, Doctor Doom has been a fucking amazing ass run. Christopher Cantwell displays such a deep understanding of Doctor Doom as a character, and constantly is pushing what his character is to the edge, as it were. This run, even though it's only been 10 issues, has been totally nuts. Like, there have been so many crazy things that have happened. Doom, he was blamed for a missile attack that was on a moon base, which resulted in a black hole. The Blue Marvel got sucked into the black hole. There was a whole thing with Otto Octavius. Kang, the Conqueror, the Time Traveler, has been involved. It's a whole thing. And this whole time, Doom has been plagued, I guess you could say, by visions of a future in which he is actually the savior of humanity, right? And he has grappled with this throughout the series. He wants to be this savior. He wants to kind of reach his calling and make the world a better place. Doom is one of those villains that is very, I don't know, I guess not morally ambiguous, but one of those villains that kind of wants to be one of the good guys, right? You know, everyone's favorite kind of villain. In the last issue, in Doom 9, we left off total crazy cliffhanger where Doom fucked everything up. He got bean-boozled by Reed Richards, and it looks like he got sucked into the black hole. Now, for some reason, that means that he gets teleported to this future in which the world is perfect, I guess. But hey, the Blue Marvel is there, and so we reunite with Blue Marvel. And Doom kind of gets to look at this future prophecy world, I guess you could say. And not only that, but he gets to speak with Victor Vaughn himself from that universe. And their conversation is essentially the main crux of this issue. This has been a plot line that's been set up since issue number 1. Since we've been getting little prophetic visions since then. And this Victor in this alternate universe is a completely different person. Completely different. First of all, he has no, I guess, facial scarring, right? So he doesn't wear the outfit. He doesn't wear the cape or the cloak or the armor. He is a peaceful guy. He's not a villain in any way. I don't even know if he actually is like a king of Latveria. So he's just a completely different character all around. But it is said that he used his genius in this universe to bring about, I guess, utopia and world peace. And for the majority of this issue, we just get to see our Doctor Doom kind of react to how different his life could have been, and the things that this Doom has that he does not. And this results in a lot of very emotional moments. Some of these moments are pretty funny because, like I said, Christopher Cantwell displays such a good knowledge of Doom as a character. He's actually able to show Doom's personality in ways that makes you laugh, but also ways that are very serious to his personal plights as a character. For instance, and this isn't one of the funny moments, but Doom sheds a tear when he sees that this Victor in this future has 2 beautiful kids, something that Doom is kind of lacking in his personal life. And at one point, this Victor refers to him as tortured and broken, and Doom gets defensive. That's a reoccurring, personal point between these two throughout this issue, is that Doom is quite defensive of his own shortcomings, which is how this Victor looks upon him. Now, one of the most interesting scenes, I think, in this book is that this Victor in this future state, which, not to use a choice term that to cause confusion with another publisher, but this Victor in this future state, he has in his own possession like all the strongest objects in the universe, just sitting in his office. And it's actually quite the amazing scene. The guy has the cosmic cube, he has all the infinity stones, the ultimate nullifier, the dark hold, it looks like pretty much the whole 9. And it's really funny what Doom says. He pretty much says that he is too tired to be tempted to take any of these objects. And after that, they actually probably have one of my favorite interactions throughout the book, where our Dr. Doom says, "You've done this all on your own," he is asking him. And the Victor in the future says, "Hardly, it took the efforts of everybody to bring about this utopia." But Doom isn't very comfortable with the fact that this Victor is not exactly taking credit for making the world into this place. And this Victor confronts him and says, "You think I deserve credit?" And Doom says, "You deserve something." And Victor goes, "No more than anybody else." And this is one of my favorite moments because Doom looks at him and says, "Your humility is overwhelming and inconceivable." And Victor just says, "You are lost. Your mind is clouded." And this is a very humbling moment for Doom in a lot of ways. He is kind of being confronted with the polar opposite, version of himself. But the moment that absolutely steals the cake for this issue for me is the end here. Okay, so the future Victor is pretty much laying bare all the flaws of Doom, and he's being a little tongue in cheek with it. He tells him his outfit is ridiculous, and he says all the way down to your literal finger guns within your suit. It's all just ludicrous nonsense. Doom's reaction to this is something I did not see coming. After the future Victor gives him this whole shit talking, Doom turns around and actually blasts this guy, and full spoilers here, kills himself. He kills the future Victor, which I did not see coming at all. Blue Marvel runs into the room, and he is freaking out. And this is where things get absolutely fucking nuts, okay? Doom punches the glass and grabs the ultimate nullifier out of this weapons chest that I was describing earlier. And without hesitation, Doom just smacks the ultimate nullifier, turns it on, and it literally just kills this entire universe. I'm not even joking. Like, the dialogue here is on point. Christopher Cantwell deserves full nods for this. I'll read some of it here. He hits the ultimate nullifier and just says, "All of it. I annihilate all of it in one instant. This entire universe, this hoax of an existence, the repulsive and indulgent self-portrait of weakness." And get this, he says, "I have zero pity for the nearly infinite sentient beings within it as I extinguish them. In this moment, I become death's greatest servant." Like, Jesus Christ, Doom. Like, I was almost holding back laughter as I was reading this issue, just as my jaw, picking my jaw up off the floor, because I saw none of that coming. This whole issue seemed as though it was going to be Doom's turn into a full-fledged good guy. and then it just flips in one instant, and Doom kills an entire universe. That is how short-triggered, I guess you could say, Dr. Doom is. In one moment, you could piss him off, and he'll kill you and your entire universe. And honestly, the ending of this series wraps up kind of quickly, but honestly rather perfectly. Blue Marvel gets blasted back down to Earth, and he's just cursing Doom the whole time. Obviously, Doom doesn't care. For some reason, when this universe was destroyed with them in it, they popped back to their universe. I don't know why. Obviously, none of this makes any sense at the end of the day. So I'm just moving with it. But then one of my favorite side characters in this book comes back for one last hurrah. Obviously, I have said it time and time again. Christopher Cantwell is the king of side characters. And so he had to bring Kang the Conqueror back for one last huzzah. And I absolutely love his appearance here. He pops back in, that's been Kang's whole shtick throughout this series, that he can just kind of boop in and boop out unexpectedly. And he sees Doom on the throne and says, "You must be in good spirits then." And what Doom says is so ridiculously cold. He says, "There's no good in me, Kang. There never was, and there never shall be." And so those are the last words that Christopher Cantwell decides to leave us from the mouth of Doom. But then we get two more. I mean, if we're really breaking it down on a word level here, we get one last little bit, and it's actually a bit that's in Latin. And I have it here in my Google translator, so I will play what it sounds like from the computer.
E saecula saeculorum.
And what that phrase means in Latin, it just simply means forever. And that's followed up by an in English, amen. So I guess that's sort of what Christopher Cantwell wants us to take away from this Doom run, is that Doom has zero goodness in him. He is an evil bastard, and that's all he is. And then we're slapped with the big fat the end. Wow, that was a run. Holy shit. I really, when I finished this issue, I knew, I was like, that's my number one, easily my number one issue, probably one of my number one series of the last year. Doom was an amazing run, I have to say. And, it was only 10 issues, a little shorter than maybe I would have liked. I would have loved to see it go at least 12, but I will take it. 10 issues, it does not lack at all. This run will make an amazing hardcover. Is an amazing, afternoon read, just a quick binge. God, I really can't wax more about this run. Christopher Cantwell, he's probably one of my new favorite writers in the comic game. He hit the ground running. I'm pretty sure Dr. Doom is one of his first runs, and I'm loving what he's doing on Iron Man. So I'm fully pleased. Dr. Doom, totally amazing. Please, guys, do yourself a favor. If you have not been reading Doom, you're severely missing out, because it is a run that I think we will remember for a long time. And that is all I have for you guys here this week from New Age Comics. So full disclosure here, I'm being fully honest with you guys. Performance-wise, to me, that was one of my roughest podcast episodes. I apologize if I seemed weird or loose, too distant throughout that recording. I was trying a lot of new stuff out here. One of those being, I actually had virtually no show notes. Maybe that's apparent by my rambling and how nonsensical I sounded throughout this episode. But I'm trying to work to have zero show notes in my show, and it's not easy, but that's a work in progress. Hopefully I can get better at coming off smoother and being less anxious in the studio. I seriously, I've been sweating my balls off this whole time, just in this boiling room. It's 76 degrees and I can't wait to go home. But that being said, I won't take up more of your guys' time here, and I will rattle off what's coming out next week, and then I will get up out of here. So we got a lot to be excited for next week, but it's actually going to be a bit of a smaller week, and I am very excited for that in and of itself. So we are getting Avengers issue number 40. This is the beginning of the Enter the Phoenix arc. I am very excited for that and to see how that goes. We are also getting King in Black tie-in, Doom, and Iron Man issue number 1. I was just ranting and raving about Doom and how much I love Iron Man, and this is going to be a crossover of the two, written by Christopher Cantwell and drawn by Salvador Larroca. So that may or may not be my number 1 issue next week, but there's also going to be the King in Black Namor issue number 2 tie-in. I did not care for the first one. I will be giving the second one my rack test coming this Wednesday to see if I want to get it. But speaking of event tie-ins, we are getting the last Dark Knight's Death Metal tie-in with the most absurdly, obnoxiously long name ever. And here it is. Dark Knight's Death Metal, The Last 52, War of the Multiverses, issue number 1. Wow, what a mouthful, but the cover looks pretty awesome. It's a good Dan Mora cover, and it's the last tie-in, so I'll be getting it, and we'll see how that goes. But then we're also getting Shang-Chi issue number 4, penultimate issue alert. That should be exciting. And then we're getting a good grip of X-Men books, or at least I am. I will be getting X-Men issue number 16 and Wolverine issue number 8, which actually legacy number wise is Wolverine issue number 350. So that ought to be a thicker book, and I'm excited for that. And then here's kind of a random one that I don't know if a lot of people were anticipating this week. Ghost Rider, The Return of Vengeance, issue number 1. Vengeance is one of those 90s characters that was all spiky and edgy, quite literally and physically. So we'll see how that random one-shot is. I hope it's very cool. And that's what's coming out next week. Boom. Yeah, that was the show this week. I apologize if I sound crazy or anything like that. I'm hoping I can have the show back on track as of next week, given that it is a shorter week, and that I should have time to do so. So thank you guys so much for listening. It seriously means the world to me that some of y'all are out there putting up with my psychotic rambles and ravings about comics, but that for some reason some people think that it's cool and or funny, and or maybe just pathetic to watch and gawk at. I don't know. I guess I'm okay with it all. But yeah, if you like what I'm doing here, guys, go ahead and follow me on whatever you're on. And don't forget to go leave me a rating on Podchaser if you really like what I'm doing here. So thank you guys so much. And I will catch you in the next week for those comics that I just talked about. So have a good one, guys. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.